Well, hello and welcome to the Wine and Wisdom Show. It is so wonderful to have you here. If you are a returning guest, thank you for coming back and cheers to you. I love it when I see familiar faces. But if you are here for the very first time, let me tell you what it's all about. I know it must appear that it might just be about having an excuse for a wine, which of course it is, and sharing of wisdom, but the show is actually about connection. And I think that's one thing we've learned over the last 12 months, that as humans, we really crave connecting with other humans who bring a smile to our faces, some warmth to our heart, and some wisdom to our brain. And oh my gosh, the guest tonight that I have for you will definitely be doing that. I feel very lucky that I've been surrounded by so many incredible, resilient, and courageous self-leaders who are making a positive difference across the globe. And as I said, tonight's guest is no different. But before we get started on that, what I'd love to do is to acknowledge the traditional custodians spread across the many lands that we're all located on today. I'm personally coming to you from the lands of the Birrabirragal people here in Birchgrove, Balmain. I do pay my respects to these traditional owners who have nurtured and protected this wonderful country that we all get to work, live and play in. I'd also like to extend my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. So, you can see who's coming on. Are you okay, board member Graeme Cowan? I know that you've seen it. Everyone's been excited. I've been getting texts and emails. Hello, Graeme. How are you?
Great, thanks, Heidi. Really lovely to join you.
It's so lovely to have you here. And Graeme, what have you got in your glass tonight?
I've got a little Pinot.
Ah, very nice. Yeah, I've got a buttery Chardonnay as usual. Old habits die young, hard, whatever the expression is. So, Graeme, we've known each other for a little while. I've watched your amazingness over the last, 5, 6, 7 years, but we have, in the last 12 months, actually been in a mastermind group together, so we've got to know each other quite well. But I'd love it if you would share with everybody here tonight, all the good things that you are sprinkling across the world in the amazing Graeme Cowan way.
Yeah, I guess it really starts with a little bit about my story. I worked in sales and marketing, and I work in human resources, and it was very much in the corporate era. I worked with Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer and those sorts of organisations. And then I worked with Morgan & Banks and other recruitment companies. But there was a really tumultuous time in the market, where the recruitment market just got hammered, and I got hammered as well. I'd had suffered with depression early in my life, but I began a 5-year episode, which my psychiatrist described as the worst ever treated. I was out of work. My marriage broke down. I had to go back and live with my parents, and I sort of call that a little bit of my George Costanza years, where I really wasn't keeping it well. Like, I love George, but I don't want to be George.
Yeah, no, that's right. I'm sure no one wants to be George.
And then it was a gradual emergence from that, involved, starting to exercise regularly, reconnecting with family and friends, meditating, and a really, I guess, pivotal moment was when I decided to write my first book, which was called Back from the Brink. Yeah. And that was where I interviewed people, well-known and everyday Australians who'd gone through really tough times and what helped them. And I think when I was working on a project really about purpose and trying to help others, that really assisted with my recovery. You move from an I to a we, and how can you make a difference? And then through my books, I started speaking, and then through that, I met Gavin Larkin, and Gavin was the founder of Are You OK? Also the CEO of an advertising agency. And he heard me speak, and he just approached me about being an ambassador. And when he shared what it was about, really targeting the people around those that could be vulnerable, I knew how important that was. to people's sense of well-being and self-esteem and all this sort of stuff. And so I really was, all in that first year. And it was quite an amazing year in 2009. We had really no money, no employees. But we had
a DSC as well, by the way.
But we did start off with a really, really great brand and a great message. And it was a simple message that a conversation could change a life. And I really knew from my own experience that I wouldn't have made it without the help and support of my parents when I wasn't going too well. Yeah. And so that led really to being asked to speak back in the corporate world. And even back in 2009, I was offering to speak about, optimizing mental health, and all the companies were saying, "Oh, we've got no problem here. It's all under control. Not an issue." But of course, that really changed substantially in the last 5 years, where there's been real recognition of what the cost is of having poor mental health and what the advantages are of having great mental health. And so initially I sort of talked about overcoming depression and helping carers of people with depression, but it pretty quickly evolved to talking about mood. And I have a model called the moodometer, which has the green zone, amber zone, red zone. And in the green zone, we're optimistic, resourceful, energetic, grateful. In the red zone, we're angry, depressed, ashamed, etc. And in the middle. And I found that language can be really important. And just like having the right language with "Are you okay?" was really pivotal. Talking about a moodometer and talking about green zones and red zones rather than, mental illness really helped to break down that stigma. And it sort of evolved to working with, leaders to having the right environment, a caring and resilient environment.
Yeah, I mean, I read a stat just recently regarding the impact that mental ill health has in Australia on the productivity. It was done by the Productivity Commission, which, as you know, is the government's key economic kind of advisory board to these types of things. And they said that mental ill health is costing us $220 billion a year just here in Australia. And, mental ill health is obviously a wide spectrum of what falls under that umbrella. But it really has a very wide ripple effect, not just on our professional lives individually, on our ability to perform at work, but it also has an impact on our team members that we're involved with, the customers that organisation might be trying to serve, and of course a ripple effect through our families and our friends and our communities. And this particular report said if we just invested, I think it was, I've got it here, 4.2 billion, we could save another 20 billion. That there's just so much money in prevention, I suppose, that is still possible for us. And I think, when you've got people like yourself who are going into organisations, you're helping leaders and their teams to put things in place so they can turn up and be able to work to the best of their ability. I mean, we just need more, though, don't we, Graeme? Because it's just such an important part. And I think in this last 12 months, gosh, I mean, I don't know about you, but like that kind of mental health pandemic that we are in and will continue to unfold this year. I mean, everyone expected 2021 to be this brilliant, sparkly, fabulous year. We're all going to get over it and it's going to be fine. But of course, we know that's not the case. And people are really struggling in February, looking ahead for a whole year ahead, aren't they?
They really are. And, for the last year or so, I've been asking people what they found most stressful about the pandemic. And two things always come through. It doesn't matter whether it's government or not-for-profit or private enterprise. It's uncertainty and also isolation. And the uncertainty always comes first. And, I think we are used to having a degree of control in our lives. And this experience has just, thrown that out the window. And unfortunately, groups in Victoria and Melbourne have probably had it worse than anyone. And, they had a massive, I think last time I heard that, about 130 days of, tight lockdown. And then this last weekend they went back into it again.
It's just tragic. It's tragic. I'd love to know, for those of you who are listening, where are you dialing in from? Is anybody from Melbourne right now from lockdown, or have we got people in Sydney, or whereabouts in Australia are you watching us from, so we can see, what your experiences have been in Australia, which of course are far better than any other place in the world, but it's all relative, right? So Graeme, when we're talking about how difficult the year ahead is going to be for everyone as we go in and out of things, I'd love you to, here's Belinda, really seeing this in the workplace right now in Sydney, yes, lots of trouble with people coping. So, which brings me to my question, which is all about what do you think are the three most, I suppose, impactful things that people can do for themselves when there's so much we can't control, of course. Yeah. All we have to do is what we can have some control of in our own lives. What do you suggest are those three things that we can have a bit of control over?
Yeah, and I think, that volatility, the uncertainty has been very draining for people. And so what I really talk about is focusing on the things we can control. And as you say, we have choice on what we choose to do each day. And I talk about, three areas of resilience for wellbeing: vitality, which is our physical health, like exercise, resting well, eating well; intimacy, which is our emotional well-being, so having strong and supportive relationships around us and nurturing those relationships. Yeah. Then finally, prosperity, which is our contribution well-being, the contribution we make in our work or charity or wider world. And the vitality, intimacy, prosperity stands for VIP. And I say to people, you have to act like a VIP, and acting like a VIP is making sure that you top up little bits of, not wine, but water into those glasses, because you can't just do one and forget the other. It's like a stool, and if one leg's a bit wonky, the whole thing falls over.
Absolutely.
And just fitting in little things each day which are rewarding, I think, is central to being in good shape and good mood.
Yeah. And I'd love to know, those who are listening, what are you doing to make sure that you are somehow, some way feeling a little better about each day, even when you don't know what is ahead? What is your habitual thing that that your fallback to make sure that you kind of can keep yourself together? For me, to me, your sleep's just so important. When I don't sleep, everything kind of crumbles. And so there's about a dozen things I do every day to make sure I can go to sleep and stay asleep. And I wish I wouldn't have to do all of them, but I just know that the effect of not sleeping on my mental health is so dramatic. I don't know. Do you have trouble sleeping at all, Graeme? Have you?
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. I'm exactly the same. When that's going well, my mood is usually going well, and when it's not, and the the disturbing thing is that it can sort of be a self-fulfilling prophecy. You start to worry about it, and then you sleep less. And in fact, last year, I think it was around July, I started to experience that. And so even though, I hadn't seen a doctor about my depression for about 8 years, I went back and got on medication, and that really helped with the sleep again. And that's the first thing he said to me. This guy had known me for 12 years. He says, one priority is getting the sleep under control, and we did that, and then other things started to fall into place. But it can be easy, and I think when there's real sameness about our day, and like it was Groundhog Day for a lot of last year, doing in the same place, doing the same things. And so it is really important to just remind ourselves that self-care isn't selfish. If we don't look after ourselves, we can't look out for other people and support other people.
Absolutely. And thank you, Sheb, for putting here your ongoing mindfulness practice, checking in with emotion, mental and physical state every few hours. That's fabulous. Focusing on your breath. And I know Belinda said that she is, exercise is the thing, but struggles to make it consistent. And of course, everybody's like scrambling right now, trying to do everything especially if you've got little ones that you're trying to sort out with, homeschooling in some sort of way, especially in Victoria. It makes it so much harder, doesn't it?
It really does. And, we have a long way to go. And so what I think is really important is not to think too far ahead, but just to really focus on 1 week ahead, and to consider that week ahead. When am I doing things for myself? When I'm doing my exercise? When am I, getting into bed? When am I, eating well? When am I catching up with friends, even if it is remotely? And just to know that you have those in the week ahead, I think does a lot of things for just having a bit of a sense of control when there's lots that are outside our control.
Yeah. Graeme, I told you this last year. I hadn't thought about mentioning it tonight, but I think it's important because it's part of this whole conversation about stigma. And, that mental ill health is such a terrible stigma about it. And I think as professionals in workplaces, people don't like to say that they're struggling because they don't want, well, for one, everyone is worried about losing their roles and their jobs. More now than they've ever been. So they don't want to put their hand up to say, oh my gosh, I'm not coping, because they're worried that they'll be somehow performance managed out. But I think this whole thing about stigma and sharing our stories, and, to let you all know where I'm going with this is that I was watching Graeme deliver a webinar, and he talked about what he's just said, that he hadn't seen someone for 8 years. He was going really well, but things started to get really wobbly for him and unravel, and he wasn't sleeping and went back to see his support people. And just by you saying it out loud and being brave enough to say, I'm struggling again, to everybody who was listening, it made me go, you know what? I'm actually struggling too. This has been a really, really tough year. I mean, as speakers and people who are doing training and development, I mean, I know for me, I lost 95% of my work in March for the whole year, and I felt it's just scramble. And I did do okay, to keep my head above water, but far out. By the end of last year, I was drowning and ignoring it. Because I felt I couldn't give myself a break. I had to save my business, and I felt that I had this, talking about what we talk about, that we have this gift to help others so much to get through the tough times. Yet I was drowning, and so I want to say again to you, thank you for having the courage to say it out loud, because that made such a great impact on me, because I went and sought some help that I really did need at the time. And I just hope that if we can all be okay with sharing a story to kind of get rid of this stigma that just because we're wobbly for a little bit doesn't mean we're going to be wobbly forever, and it doesn't mean we can't perform.
That's right. And it's really great of you to share that, Heidi. I've, been in this business talk, my books talk about my experience, my struggle, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But what I've come to know is that when I share my story, it gives people permission to share their story. Yes. And so for anyone in the workplace, because stigma is still there, more or less in some organizations. And the thing that I really recommend to people, if you are in a workplace, is to confide in someone you like and trust. It doesn't matter if it's your manager. If it's your manager, that's great. But if it's someone else, that's fine as well. Have practice talking about it. And there's the very odd saying that a problem shared is a problem halved. And it's so true. When you voice it, you can almost feel the levels going down. And I've also, been on a long journey thinking about, mental ill health, and is it really all bad? And I'd be the first to say that when you're going through it, it does seem all bad. Yes. But there was a remarkable book that I read called A First-Rate Madness, and it was written by an American psychiatrist called Nasagimi. And what he did was to review some of the most extraordinary leaders in the last century or so, and looking at people like Winston Churchill, looking at people like Abraham Lincoln, looking at people like Gandhi, looking at people like Martin Luther King, looking at people like JFK, and what he was able to show, and he was able to tap into research and previous documents to do this, was that these people had actually had their own mental illness breakdown. Abraham Lincoln had a really shocking breakdown, as did Winston Churchill. He battled with bipolar and drinking, and yet those two leaders are thought as the two greatest leaders in the UK and US respectively. And Nasagimi's point is that they weren't great in spite of their mental illness, but because of it. And what he means by that was that because they'd been through it, they had a lot of empathy with other people. They also were able to see reality. So not be super optimistic, not be super pessimistic, but see a realistic outlook, and also very, very pragmatic. And I thought that is a really great thing to share. And in some of the creative areas, bipolar, some of the most amazing artists of our whole life, our whole world, have bipolar, and that's allowed amazing creativity and productivity. So it's not all bad. And I think if you learn the lessons, and I'm a bit of a slow learner, I have to keep on learning it, but when you learn the things that keep you well and you do them, and I would say the vast majority of time that is for me now, I'm in a much, much better place than I was before I went through that really bad crisis. So
yeah. And Graeme, what do you think? I mean, I really feel for like leaders right now. They're trying to lead teams through a screen. Some groups that I'm working with, it's that they haven't even met their team members at all face to face. So what are your insights on how these leaders can actually create, I suppose, have these kind of, you call them caring teams, like to be still caring, but allowing performance to happen at the same time? What are your tips for that?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things with leaders, they've been hit really hard. And, I think one of the biggest lessons for leaders is self-care. And some can be really guilty of trying to help and assist everyone else without assisting themselves. And all the evidence shows that if a leader is a good place, it flows on to the team. And so that's the very, very first lesson. The second lesson is, the importance of promoting connection. And it's been much more challenging this time. As you say, people have been geographically isolated. But, I've heard some, great examples of organisations, having things like Trivial Pursuit nights and movie nights, and also forming interests around clubs. One group I work with had a photography club and a movie club and a book club. And so we looked at other ways to generate that. And so I think there's been a great deal of innovation in that regard. I think largely leaders have done a very good job, and it's been tough because they've often had to over communicate, especially in the beginning.
Yes.
And whereas they might have one little 45-minute meeting a week, suddenly their diary is full of 45-minute meetings. And so carving out time for self-care in the day is really critical for both yourself but also your team.
Absolutely. And I love the comments we've got here. I mean, Sheb, she said, as you grow older, you will discover that you have two hands, one for helping yourself, the other for helping others. Oh, I love that so much.
I love it too.
That is just beautiful. And Catherine Kate has said, I think it was when you were talking about the bipolar and, the great artists, it is just different wiring, right?
It is.
What's to say that normal wiring is the only wiring? And, it's not. We're just all different. We're humans. That's what makes us so special and unique. And to just kind of put people into these shoe boxes of this is the way you've got to be and the way you've got to act and the way you've got to feel, and no other way, it's not right. And it's not helpful when we're at work trying to perform at all.
Yeah, and having this diversity where people can feel they can be comfortable being themselves, they can express ideas, they can try things. If it doesn't work out, we learn from it, move on. And I mentioned to you just before we came on air that I've been interviewing some leaders for a new podcast I'm doing, The Caring CEO, and one of them was Mike Schneider, the CEO of Bunnings. And I asked him, they're actually rated the #1 most trusted brand in Australia, corporate brand in Australia, by Roy Morgan Research. And I asked him what the secret was of that. And he said he really believed that a big element was the huge diversity of their workforce. Anyone who's been in a Bunnings will see all races, all ages. They actually have 30% of their workers are over 50. I think that must be the only workplace that has that higher number of people. But he thinks it's having that diverse group there who are really committed to helping. He really attributes that trusted brand as having and embracing diversity.
Yeah. Well, I think also, I mean, I have no idea how to do anything that most people go to Bunnings to get things, but anytime I'm there, I cannot believe how helpful everybody is. And Sheb, I think, they should have your quote that you've got there as their Bunnings mantra, because I think that's what they do. They are forever seeking you out to see how they can help you and tell you which aisle to go to. And, someone like me who has no idea, I say, I want to do this. What do I need? And there's someone there to help out. So I do love that. Graeme, you're a professional speaker, and, things obviously changed quite dramatically last year for you, which no doubt had an impact on the way you felt about your career and your life and yourself and your self-worth. I mean, like it did for everybody, having to change that. What are the specific things that you've done to, I know you mentioned what you said you think are the 3 self-care things that everyone should do, but what are the things that you do when things are really wobbly to make sure that you can, what I call it, to keep your resilience bucket strong? What are you doing?
A really, really big thing for me, and in fact, it's my one thing really, is meditation. And I'm a very early riser. I usually get about 5 and meditate for 20 minutes. And I was in that sort of situation where I was doing it most times, but not all the times. And I happened to be listening to a podcast where Hugh Jackman was interviewed, and he's been a lifelong meditator. And he said, well, he just made the decision that he was going to do it first thing every day. And I thought, well, if Hugh Jackman can do that, I can try that. and it is, really good to get something that is so good for me out of the way first. So that's a huge element. I also live very close, right adjoining Lane Cove National Park, and I find nature really, really rewarding. And so when I feel those anxiety levels rise, I really cut back on commitments, and I really make sure I'm meditating, make sure that I'm walking in nature, and also catching up with good friends. And, when I had my first really bad breakdown, I was so ashamed. I couldn't really talk with anyone about it. I really didn't. And that led to, a very severe crisis. And so after I came back, I really made an effort to nurture male friends to do things together on a regular basis. And I have, 2 mates I meet at Curl in Northern Sydney each Sunday. We go for a slow jog down to Manly and back and have breakfast. And that's every Sunday. And, there's the exercise, but then there's also really great talking after you've been through that. Every Thursday morning, I've got a friend that's a partner at KPMG. We're catching up at 6:30 tomorrow. We go for a walk, and we're able to talk about, the real stuff. And I think there's something about walking shoulder to shoulder and in nature which makes that much easier rather than looking directly at people. Yes. So I have these rituals where I have built this relationship over a period of time. And when it happened, I mentioned back in July last year, I got onto these people really quickly and said, look, I'm struggling again. If you want to help, ask me to go for a walk. And so I suddenly had, my diary full of walk. And there's a wonderful book that I read called Friendimacy. Friendimacy, I can't even say it's a combination of friend and intimacy.
Okay.
But written by a woman, and she talks about 3 components of really meaningful relationships. And the first is positivity. It must be a great experience to see that person. That's a no-brainer. But then the second thing she says is consistency. And, that's why I really decided to put rituals in place that do make them happen almost by default. And the third element, and this is the area that many, many men break down on, is vulnerability. Being able to talk about, what's not going well, what are you really concerned about? And a lot of men tend to bottle that up. But I've just really learned that nurturing strong relationships is probably, it's a fantastic element of life, really.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, that connection piece is just such a crucial component, especially when things aren't going well. And unfortunately, you've got to have built those. You've got to nearly have the rituals and the connections prior to when things spiral out of control. Because when you are at rock bottom, it's hard to stick to rituals. It's hard to build connections. It's actually nearly impossible. And I suppose that's, I know this is part of your life work. It's part of my life work to help people understand that building those rituals, those good habits, those connections when times are good, so they will hold you together when times get wobbly. Because as we all know, especially now, there's so much we can't control. There's so much we have no idea how it's going to impact us, and we just have to do what's good for us when we can, when we know we can, so that hopefully that will hold us together. And I mean, how beautiful that you got to that point last year where you were like, oh, I'm getting shaky. I need my support crew. And prior to probably you getting lower, you were able to bring all that together before it got out of control.
And it just turns around faster when you're able to do that. And you're very right. When things are good, you think, oh, I can skip the gym, or I don't really need to do that. But it is a bit like a vaccination or inoculation. By doing it, you reduce the chance it will happen, but you also probably are in a better place that if you do hit a hard spot, you can take that corrective action. Yeah.
I love what Kate said here with the great rituals require practice till they become automatic. Absolutely. Like cleaning our teeth, right? We just all do it. It's just part of the routine. And that's what we need with either waking up in the morning and meditating, whatever it is. I don't know if we listened to the same podcast with Hugh Jackman. Was it Tim Ferriss one that you listened to?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. And it was like, so I only listened to it a couple of weeks ago, actually. And apart from meditating, far out, could Hugh Jackman get any better? So for everybody who's a bit of a Hugh Jackman fan, all the girls who are on the call right now, or all the boys, not only does he meditate first thing in the morning, but he sits in bed. So he gets up, he goes and makes a cup of tea for him and Deb, comes back to bed with a cup of tea for Deb. He reads to her for 15 minutes, and then she reads to him for 15 minutes. Like, oh my God, that man is so divine.
And I'll tell you something else, that he was one of the first supporters of Are You OK? I think it was in the second year. He did a video encouraging everyone to Are You OK? So can you imagine how much it would cost to get Hugh Jackman to endorse anything? But he had a good relationship with Gavin Larkin, the founder. And he's a legend in I've got a bit of a man crush on him.
Well, I've definitely got a man crush on him. And I love how, I mean, when you get your bare feet on the ground, right, in nature, far out, that there's something about bare feet on sand or grass or dirt, and you just feel that just this connection with Mother Earth, and it fills you up. It's so beautiful. Sheb said, walk and talk with Graeme. That's is what she's going to do. Yes, fantastic. Yes. So, Graeme, last question for the night. I'd love to know, what is the most impactful piece of wisdom that you have been given? What impact has it made on your life? And what are the ripple effects of that for you?
I'll try to mention two. I once heard a saying, and it was an Indian proverb, that relaxation is who you are, tension is who you think you should be. And I know that this applies to me. When you're authentic, when you're doing your stuff, it feels right. When you're trying to be someone else or upset about, an element of how you live your life, it can often really, really cause stress. So that was, that I think has always been very meaningful to me. And then the second thing sounds a bit odd, but, before we came on air, I mentioned that, unfortunately my dad passed away 2 weeks ago, and he'd had a long life, a healthy life, a full life. And, but there's always the final shock when someone, it's permanent, it's permanent.
Yeah.
But I was asked to do the eulogy. And so I don't know, 91 years, how do you put it in 10 minutes? And so I asked 34 people that knew him well just to write 3 words they thought of when they thought of Dad. And then I had it turned into a word cloud, into a big heart. And as you know, on word clouds, the largest words, the most frequently used, and by far the largest word was generosity. And he was generous with his advice, his support. He was generous in the community. He was, generous with his money. And, really remember that. And the second ones were honesty and integrity, and then cheeky and funny. And the one that caused a little laughs was ice cream was on there, because he loved an ice cream. But there is a fabulous poem called "What Will Matter" by Michael Stevenson, and it really talks about what is really important in the cold light of day, when all the to-do lists are gone. What will really matter? And I really encourage everyone to find that. If you want to get a PDF copy of it, just send me a message via LinkedIn. Be very happy to send it to you. But it ended up saying that it's not, your wealth, it's not where you live that's going to be remembered. It's what you built. It's what you helped teach. It's what you helped grow. It's how people remembered advice. And I must say that, just seeing that word cloud of Dad was, very, very moving. I've really been just reflecting on it every day for, since he's passed.
Of course you would. I mean, it's so close. As Kate said, it's very fresh. But what a beautiful thing to do, a word cloud with everybody's one word. I love that. I've never seen that. I mean, what a treasure thing to have, of a memory of what everybody remembers him for. It's just beautiful.
And it's a message for us as well. What do we want to be remembered for when we go?
Yeah.
What word do you want people to say about us? And it does put to-do lists and work in some sort of perspective when you think about that.
Absolutely. And I think for all of us, this last 12 months has really recalibrated a lot of things of, what do we want to do? What do we want to be remembered for? What should I continue to be a part of that is actually going to bring me fulfillment and purpose? Because, the world can change in a heartbeat. So there's no point just waiting for another time to do that one thing or to be that great person. We need to do it now.
There's a great thing I read about Benjamin Franklin, and Benjamin Franklin was an extraordinarily successful productive person. He was an inventor, a wealthy philanthropist and a politician and everything. And he started each day by getting up at 5 a.m. and answering this question, what good am I going to do today? And then at the end of the day, 6 o'clock, he answers the question, what good did I do today?
Yeah.
And I think that, having some sort of ritual that works for you, whatever your, most productive time of day is, to really think about that, because when you're scrambling with work or scrambling with other things, if you are thinking about how you could assist someone else, it's good for our well-being as well.
It sure is. So Graeme, I ask you, what would be the one word that you hope that people put in a word cloud for you about your life? What do you think that one word would be?
I think I'm going to try and emulate my dad, because I think generous is fantastic on so many fronts, and so that's going to be mine. How about you, Heidi? What do you think? What one word would you like to strive for?
Well, I have always strived for wanting to be remembered as courageous. That has certainly been my word. No matter what's going on, how big the challenges are or little, that I have had the courage to take that one step forward to try to keep moving forward, rather than getting stuck. And so courage is certainly the word for me. It's always been my word, but I've never thought of it in the way you've described it tonight. But I certainly, that would definitely be my word. I'd love to know what the people who are listening, what would your one word be that you'd love people to describe you for your legacy, as Sheb said, working on her legacy this weekend? What's that one word? Because I think if we have that one word, I know, and people do have their word for the year, but what's the one word for your life that every morning you wake up and go, I'm going to live that today. And if I can live that every day, just a little smidgy little bit, wow.
Fantastic. And great word there too, Sheb, kindness. What a beauty.
Oh, yes. Need thinking time
and music. It's something really worth thinking about, and generous for Kate. And I really urge you to check out that poem, What Will Matter, and it really speaks to legacy and how will the world remember us?
Kate, I know you're still listening there, but can you just put What Will Matter poem in the comments for me? Because that would just remind me to find it and put a link in the comments later. But if you put it there now, that will just spring my memory once we're finished. And thank you. Compassionate Linda, thank you. That's a beautiful one to have. So what's going to happen after we finish, which is going to be in a couple of minutes, is that I'm going to find the poem and I'm going to put the link here, or you can just reach out to Graeme via LinkedIn, because he spends a lot of time there, definitely. And thank you, Kate. I'm also going to put a link. Graeme has a wonderful video series on how to, self-care is not selfish, is what you call it, isn't it, Graeme? And I think it's very timely that people really take the time to prioritize themselves when there's so much we can't control. Let's just focus on what we can control, because when we have that feeling that our power's taken away of everything in life, that is what can really impact our mental health in a good way or a bad way. So when we can just focus on what we have a little bit of control on, which I know that's what you talk about within that video series, it can make such a difference. So I will post that for you all, so that you can do that. Any final questions for Graeme? Any final words of legacy that you would like to post? We'd love to see them. Graeme, thank you so much. Thank you for always being so honest and raw and sharing your story, so that we, for one, can dull down the stigma that comes with mental ill health. Firstly, that we all want to do that. But secondly, to encourage us to have the conversations, because it's those conversations and connections with other humans that can make such a difference.
Absolutely. And thanks so much for the opportunity to be on the show, Heidi. I've really admired your work. It's been great getting to know you much more in the last year, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more discussions going forward as well.
Absolutely, they will. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you would like to know who my next lot of lineup of guests are, you can subscribe here to be notified. But in the meantime, we hope you have a wonderful 2 weeks. And cheers. Cheers to you, Graeme.
Cheers.
Everybody, have a lovely night, and we will see you real soon. Good night.